Welcome to the BOF Social Hour is someone you all know. He is the originator and executive producer of the great Batman film franchise, which is 35 years old, right? That's what we're going to talk about here today. Michael E. Uslan is back. And when I say Batman 89 is 35 years old, what crosses your mind immediately? Just
How can that possibly be?
yes.
It all just happened yesterday, and I'm still basking in the glow of it. I still get the chills every time I hear Danny Elfman's opening theme, or the Batmobile theme as it's racing through the night sky, or the end of the movie as the camera is panning up the building to Batman overlooking the bat signal. I still get the chills and can't believe it's been this long.
And the journey to get Batman 89 made, we talked about many times, and you can read it in your book, The Boy Who Loved Batman. And that seemed like, I bet that decade seemed like an eternity. And now you look back and it's been 35 years since the film came out.
Yeah, well, you know that from the time I bought the rights to Batman from DC Comics, which was October 3rd, 1979, till the time the first movie came out in June of 1989, um, that was largely 10 years of frustration and rejection. That was trying to make something happen, trying to push things forward, and it was always it was really one step forward, two steps back, and occasionally two steps forward, one step back. And day to day, Bill, that came out in my personal life with, okay, how am I going to pay next month's bills? And then it became, how am I going to pay next week's bills? Um, how am I going to keep the lights on in my house? How am I going to make sure that my family's got food on the table? What other things must I do while we're pushing for and waiting for the Batman franchise to materialize the way I had envisioned it? And all the nights staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to manufacture work, get projects set up, push things forward on the Batman side, write comics, write books, look at the want ad section in our New Jersey newspaper to see if maybe on weekends I could get a construction job, because I used to work construction for my dad summers when I was in high school. Um, it was almost that 10 years went by on an hourly basis. I don't know how to communicate what it was like, but I was fortunate because my parents were very, very special people who sacrificed everything for their two kids. And as my dad had taught me about the meaning of passion in life and incorporating your passion into your work, from my mom, it was always about honor and integrity, commitment, perseverance, having that high level of frustration, understanding that if you have dreams or goals and you then make a commitment, in order to persevere, you will experience pain. And you have to learn how to embrace that pain in order to keep it going. And so I was very fortunate with that. Plus, I had a great support system. This couldn't have happened without my wife, Nancy, being totally behind me in terms of my life's quest here, my parents, friends, family, my brother, who earlier in life was my personal Joker and later in life became my personal Alfred. So that was all part of it, Bill. And I hope that explains a little bit what it was like and why this 35th anniversary becoming an international celebration is so important to me.
What was it like the first time you saw the film completed?
We were in the lobby of this theater, and there were going to be maybe 6 of us watching this movie. And I was with my partner, Ben, and Ben Melniker.
Mm-hmm.
Just to recap for your audience, Ben was my dad's age and much like a second father to me. Ben was a legend in the movie business. Ben started at MGM in its Tiffany years. He started at the end of 39, which was the year of Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. He quickly rose from general counsel to head of their antitrust division, then became the sole executive vice president. All divisions reported to Ben, all divisions. He was chairman of their film selection committee in their Tiffany years and on the parent board of Lowe's. Ben did the deals for Ben-Hur, Dr. Zhivago, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Gigi and their musicals. He negotiated the deal with Colonel Tom Parker to bring Elvis over to MGM, and the list goes on and on and on. He was one of the people that formed the Motion Picture Association of America with the heads of the other studios on one weekend with LBJ in the White House. So I was with Ben, and he turned to me and he said, we were about to walk into this theater, and there were heavy, like black velvet, thick curtains that you had to pass through. And Ben said to me, Michael, you're going to walk through these curtains now. And 2 hours from now, you're going to walk out and your life will be different. Your life will be changed. And he was right. He was right. Um, Seeing Tim Burton's vision, the thing that everybody was not so sure about, would Michael Keaton actually work? And to seeing how brilliantly he pulled off his vision exactly as he said he would. Seeing Jack Nicholson being the ultimate Jack Nicholson. The Batmobile, Gotham City, the genius work of my friend Anton First, whom I miss. Um, as I said, the music that still gives me the chills. The professionalism that Robert Wool brought to the movie with a sense of comedy, but not with a sense of making fun of Batman. The beauty of Kim Basinger, she was as effective as could possibly be. Um, it was just such an incredible dream come true moment that few people have the chance to experience. And the ending is the music is rising, seeing my name on the screen. Okay, I have to admit
Of
that.
course.
Um, yeah, it was really something. The sense of pride of having persevered and that it actually was happening. We did not know how it would do, but that was less important than the fact that it actually happened. The movie was made. Everything else was out of my hands, but the movie was made. And feeling that this weight of the world I had on my shoulders, of the importance of restoring the dignity and darkness to Batman as a character, but also the importance to me of bringing respectability to the creators of these comic book characters, to Bill Finger, Bob Kane, Jerry Robinson, um, and feeling we had done that. That was a very, very important part to me. And if there's anything I learned following that, it was that it's not so much the magic of being on top of the mountain. It's the magic of appreciating the climb, the journey, and taking in the entire journey. Um, and that was something I didn't realize till that point.
You saw it, and you mentioned there were only a handful of people there that first time. and then of course the premieres and whatnot. Did you ever see it with a regular audience? And what did you, and if so, what did you get out of watching them watch the film, if that makes
I
sense?
watched it with a regular audience dozens and dozens of times. Um, that was critically important to me. You know, to me, if you're going to be an effective producer, you have to have a sense of your audience, and not just New York and LA, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about the heartland and internationally. And you really have to have that. So, dozens of times in different towns and cities, I went in and sat in the middle or sat in the back and was less watching the movie as I was watching the audience.
Yeah.
And then, critically important, I would get up and walk out with the crowd. I would walk out in the middle of the aisle and stay in the lobby or then go outside just to watch everybody and listen to what everybody was saying and what it was like. That was an important part of the experience. I also remember Nancy and I took our kids and we would drive them around, especially that opening weekend or two, to movie theaters where they would see, and this is literal, lines stretching from the box office all the way down a
Mm-hmm.
block, around the corner,
Mm-hmm.
around the back of the movie theater, out into the street. And it didn't matter if we were in LA, in New Jersey, in New York, Indiana, Cincinnati, wherever we went, there were these enormous lines. And for that opening weekend, we took them, I remember, to Westwood, which is where our premiere was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And we walked because starting 3 days before the movie opened, lines formed. And there were people with blankets. And then this is before cell phones, just so
Mm-hmm.
everybody can
Of
understand.
course.
But there were people that brought guitars and they were doing sing-alongs. And there were no screens to watch or anything. It was just kind of like campfire. It was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
campfire at camp. And people were sending somebody they were with would go out and buy food and bring it back. Um, or they would arrange to have pizzas delivered online and to see it and people sleeping. And we could drive by there at 2 o'clock in the morning and see hundreds of people asleep on sidewalks. I mean, that's a very important part of the experience that needs to be preserved, Bill. People who weren't around then, who can't possibly understand the magic of the summer of
Yes.
1989.
I was going to ask you, that's where exactly where I was going. So thank you for that segue. If recently, it's relatively recent, I saw online someone younger than me, and obviously um, said, "Oh, Batman '89, that Batmania, it wasn't that big of a deal." And I went, "Well, you weren't around then, were you?" Because I mean, if you were explaining to someone who wasn't around, that was the biggest. I don't know if I've seen anything like that since. I mean, The Dark Knight in 2008 was big, but if you didn't live that Batmania in 1989, it's hard to, especially with you mentioning no cell phones and just the state of the world back then. It it was something else, you know.
It was the second time in my life I experienced something like that. First time was in 1964 when the Beatles arrived in America
Mm,
and then did the Ed Sullivan Show and the concerts. Beatlemania was your head explodes. I
yeah.
mean, as a kid, your head
Yeah.
explodes. Your whole world was about the Beatles in one way, shape, or form. That's what was triggered with Batman in 1989. And there are several ways I always describe it. In that summer, you could not walk 20 paces through Times Square in New York without seeing a person wearing a Batman hat or a Batman t shirt. Paul Levitz, who was later the president of DC Comics, he's the one who explains what the licensing division had to deal with in terms of manufacturers. The manufacturers and suppliers that were doing T-shirts in America and other places ran out of black material
Wow.
because it
Yeah.
was all being consumed by the Batman T-shirts. I've never heard of anything like that in my life. And that's a true story. Um, Bus stops were being, like the glass displays were being broken into so people
Hmm.
could run off with the posters. We did, there was a trailer that came out, our first trailer. It was about 2 minutes long or so that had to be rushed out because people were going to um, lock us up. They were crying out that we were going to make a campy, silly, stupid Batman with Mr. Mom and a stand-up comedian as Batman, directed by the director of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And without social media and computers and phones,
Hmm.
it created such an incredible public outrage around the world through
Yes.
television, radio,
Yes. Yes.
newspapers, and magazines.
Yes.
The Wall Street Journal did a major front page story
Yep.
that took us over the barrel. Petitions were being
Yeah.
circulated. We were getting petitions from fans, demanding that we remove Michael Keaton and Tim Burton and not do this comedy thing. I thought the studio would be surrounded by pitchforks and torches. Um, and not one person had seen one frame of film. And this has been repeated many times since.
Hmm.
And I always say, Bill, a fan has not only a right, but they have a responsibility to criticize a movie. Just do it after you see it.
Yes.
Don't tell me in a public outrage that we are going to destroy the character of the Joker forever because Chris Nolan is hiring a gay cowboy to play the Joker.
Yeah.
We heard it with him. We heard it with Michael. We heard it with Ben Affleck. We
Yep.
heard it with Robert Pattinson. It
Yep.
is over and over and over again. Probably the most severe thing was with Joker, where we were all taken over the coals through social media and everything else, accused of the movie glorifying violence and all these horrible things without anyone ever having seen it until they saw it and realized it was exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. And then it was embraced by everyone. But back in 89, I claim this was the best marketed movie in history because the posters went up, the gigantic billboards went up from Times Square to the Champs-Elysees in Paris, and there was no movie title on it. It was
Hmm.
just a great big black bat in a gold oval, and it said June 23rd. But everyone around the world seemed to know what was coming.
Yes.
And that tactic, that marketing strategy, I think really paid off and increased the intrigue. One of the funny things that came out back then, somebody at Warner did some kind of research, and it was like, I don't know, 13% of the people did not see the black bat in the gold oval. They saw teeth and tonsils. They saw a reverse image when they looked at it. And I think most of those people were dental hygienists,
Yeah.
but that was kind of a funny thing that nobody who was a fan ever saw. But if you look at it and get the reverse image in your mind, you can see what they were looking at.
I'm looking at it right now. I have that on my wall and I'm trying. I can't get
So
past the bat. I can't.
the,
It's, you know,
the bat is the darkness of the open mouth,
yeah.
and the yellow is the teeth and the tonsils wagging.
Okay. Okay.
It's very, it's
So that means
crazy.
you in the story of you going to studio, pitching Batman and all the nonsense they told you about, like Little Orphan Annie, and it's a funny book and all that. What was it comes out, it's Batmania, it's a huge hit. What was the immediate impact that Batman had on movies and even the fledgling comic book movie genre at that time?
Well, it had a tremendous impact. It had an impact more important than the box office was on the world culture's perception of comic books and superheroes and supervillains. It changed it. It
Mm-hmm.
really did change it. It elevated it. It brought it a respectability that it never had before. And that's, I think, really, really important. I always talk about the one phone call I got the Monday morning after opening weekend when the box office results came out. And I get a call from the former head of production at United Artists, which was my alma mater. This was the guy who 10 years before turned me down, who said to me, Michael, you're nuts. Batman and Robin will never be successful as a movie because the movie Robin and Marion didn't do well. Now, back in circa 79, the movie Robin and Marion starred Sean Connery and Audrey Hepburn as an aging
Yeah.
Robin Hood and Maid Marian.
Yeah.
And when he told me that in 79, my jaw must have been dropped and I must have just stared at him. And I remember I didn't even say anything or ask anything. I knew him well. I just picked up my comic books and the stuff I was using to pitch. I turned around and walked out of his office. And I had to think about what he had just said. The only, it was crazy. The only reason he could have said something like that was because they both had the word Robin in the title.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing, point. That's why UA turned down the Batman franchise. So 10 years later, we have this opening success, and he calls me and he goes, Michael, I'm just calling to congratulate you on the success of Batman. I always said you were a visionary. And that
It's
was one of the most
yeah.
important lessons that I ever learned in this industry, Bill. And I turned to Ben. He heard the phone call. I turned to him and I said, I think I finally get it. If you don't believe them when they tell you you suck and your idea is crazy and horrible, but if you don't then believe them when they tell you how great your ideas are, how wonderful you are, and just continue to believe in your work and yourself, you'll do just fine. And that was a great lesson learned.
Start finishing up here. I got to ask you, 35 years later, and we've had many Batman films, we've had many comic book films. We went through an age of the golden age of comic book movies. You had the success with Disney and the MCU, and the Dark Knight trilogy is huge.
And other things like
Yeah,
Spawn, Men in Black,
yeah,
Teenage
yeah.
Mutant Ninja Turtles, The
Yes,
Mask.
yes.
Yeah.
What what's its lasting legacy?
Its lasting legacy is an acknowledgement that number one, comic books are not a genre that can be hot one box office summer and cold the next. Comic books are the equivalent of books, meaning there are comic books about superheroes, war, westerns, romance, humor, adventure, horror, crime. Everything you could find in a Barnes and Noble, you can find in the pages of comic books. And comic books are not synonymous with superheroes. And that I think is critically important. Number two is a global acknowledgement that comic book superheroes have become our contemporary mythology. And this goes right back to my pitch for teaching the world's first college accredited course on comic books that I did back in the 70s when I got the folklore department to back me on it. And it's the fact that the ancient gods of Greece, Rome, and Egypt all still exist, except today they wear spandex and capes. These are the same stories that have been handed down for thousands of years in in folklore, stories of brave warriors fighting the demons and dragons of their day. And as my folklore professor liked to remind me, doesn't matter if we call them King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table or the Avengers or the Justice League, it's still the same thing. They are meant to inspire people. They are meant to be stories about sacrifice, redemption. That's what these stories are. And whether we call him Poseidon or Neptune or Aquaman, these are the values that the superheroes espouse. These are the characters who help us form our own moral and ethical codes. And that will never go away. And at the end of the day, Bill, whether a movie succeeds or fails, any movie succeeds or fails, it comes down to what I always say are the 10 important elements that make a successful movie: story, 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 character, 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 story, and story. If we keep oversaturating the marketplace, you're going to frustrate the viewers out there. The audience is going to feel taken advantage of. If we only deliver cookie cutter movies that are just more of the same, more of the same, you're going to be using and then abusing your audience, and they will get fed up with that. If the quality of the technical aspects of movie making fails or falls below par or becomes uneven, you're going to get people who react to that in revolt. So what you need to do, great stories with filmmakers who know these characters, love these characters, have a vision for these characters, and can execute that vision. If you do that and continue to push the envelope and push the envelope, this is not some genre that will go away. This just means there will be continuous great stories about colorful, textured characters that will resonate for us on many levels all around the world. And that is, for me, the answer.
Last question. Is Batman 89 the most important comic book film? Period. I would say yes, but I'd like to hear your take on it.
I'm going to say it's a tie. You must give my old friend Dick Donner credit
Yes.
for
Yeah.
the first Superman movie. That tore open the field and made it possible. Now, it's true at that time that even the folks who were running and operating DC Comics saw no value in anything else besides Superman to turn into a blockbuster movie. The industry was populated by executives, agents who grew up with the seduction of the innocent adult crowd who looked down their nose at comic books, superheroes, and their creators. So Superman opened the door that these things could have respectability. One of the critical things was Marlon Brando being attached to that to give it that degree of respectability and making us believe a man can fly. With Batman 1989, I think we took it to a whole different level. We proved that you didn't have to be only Superman in order to do this. We proved that if you remain true to the integrity of a character, that audiences will respond to it. They didn't need a Superman version of Batman. In the same way, you don't need to make a dark version of Casper the Friendly Ghost. You don't need to make a movie
Yes.
called Casper the Unfriendly Ghost in order to make it successful. You
Yeah.
need to be true to the integrity
Yeah.
of the character. And we proved Hollywood and the world wrong. You can do serious comic book movies. You can do dark superheroes. And by God, you could make a movie out of an old TV series that had never been done
Mhm.
before. The boundaries were pushed. And to this very day, as a result of that, it is my contention, including this coming weekend, that every genre movie that has followed Batman 89 you can still see the influence, the impact of Tim Burton's vision. You can still see the impact and influence of Anton Furst's designs. You can still hear the impact and influence of Danny Elfman's notes. And that sort of impact, there's no way to begin to measure it. But that's what it achieved. So I call it a tie between the two films.
Those are the two films that probably had the biggest impact on me. I was 13 when Superman came out, and it made me want that for Batman. I wanted Batman to get a big screen, serious, movie, and then Batman 89, it is what it is, and we just talked about it. So thanks for coming on again.
Well, Bill, one last thing. You
Yes,
just
yes.
triggered something. One of the great moments of personal victory for me in my career and subsequently my life was when the Comic-Con Museum opened up in San Diego, which is enormous. It's fabulous. It's in Balboa Park. And they instituted a comic book Hall of Fame. The first character that was inducted into the Comic-Con Museum's Comic Book Hall of Fame was Batman, not Superman. That's it. That's the final victory of Dr. Doom, the final victory of Michael Uslan.
In 85 years of Batman, 35 years since 89, 85 years of the Dark Knight.
Yeah, and don't
Yeah.
forget we got the 20th anniversary of Batman Begins next year.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we got an anniversary of Batman Forever next year. The hits just keep on coming. So
They do.
it's great.
We're in the midst of the Batman saga from Matt Reeves, with, I think, doing something different for the first time within this genre. You're creating a universe based on one character. That this is Batman, because we have the Penguin coming out here shortly in September, which is the next chapter is being billed as the Batman saga. You had the Paul Dano Riddler Year One comic book tie-in that he wrote, which was fantastic. I love that this aspect of Batman. I don't think we've had a character that had its own universe. And of course, Joker 2, which is part of the Batman franchise. So we gotta count it.
And speaking of the Batman, I went back into the old files and I found starting in the second half of 1990, that's when I began petitioning and annoying the studio that we need to make a version of Batman that would showcase Batman as the world's greatest detective. We have not seen that in the media yet. I did not get a great reaction to that, as they were more focused on toys, games, Happy Meals, action, stuff blowing up. It took 32 years for me to wait for finally a movie about Batman as the world's greatest detective. And it was worth the wait.
Yeah, it was.
It was worth the wait. And people say, well, how do you describe that movie as being different from the other Batman movies? I said, I would do it this way. In the opening credits, if it was totally up to me, I would have it listed as based on the character appearing in Detective Comics, as opposed to based on the character appearing in Batman comics.
Yes. Yep. Good stuff. Before we go, would you like to tell folks what you've got going on right now? Anything you
sure.
want to tease? Or I know you got the play, The Boy Who Loved Batman. So please.
I have a responsibility to my mentor and friend, Stan Lee, who told me anytime I see an opening to get the plug in, get the damn plug in. So here it goes. My memoir, The Boy Who Loved Batman, is available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. I also narrated the Audible book version of it for those of you who would like to listen to me in your car. The sequel memoir is called Batman's Batman. It's available through the same places, and I also narrated the Audible book version of that as well. I'm very excited because The Boy Who Loved Batman, the story of my journey to buying the rights to Batman when I was a kid in my 20s, to the 10-year odyssey to getting that first movie made, It's being turned into a Broadway-bound play right now by the Nederlander Organization of New York. I am thrilled to tell you the play opens October 1st, 2024, in Tampa, Florida, at the Strauss Center for the Performing Arts. We will be running the play from October 1st until November 10th. And I just couldn't be more excited about it. And anyone who's a fan of Batman, a fan of the Batman movies, who have followed my work, I think you would really, really love this. It's funny, it's fun, it's dramatic at critical moments. But boy, it's a story of a geeky fanboy and his journey through life. So the last thing I would say is any of you online who would like to join me on social media, you'll find me on Instagram, Facebook. I understand they're now posting my Instagram stuff on X. And I try to make it fun. It's a lot about the history of comics and Batman. It's a lot of behind the scenes stuff on the movies and Batman in the media. But we just try to have fun together. And I welcome anybody who wants to join on board.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. There's no one else I'd rather do this with. Thank
I'm
you,
gonna go
sir.
watch Batman 89 now. Again. I've seen it a million times. All right, take care. We'll see you
You
soon.
too. Thanks.